So you want to know how to use pastel pencils. You've come to the right place. I'm going to take you through everything you need to know. So that's going to be the materials, which are the best and the easiest to use, and then how to get your materials ready so that you can actually get drawing, how to use them. So this is your basic blending, layering, how to stop it smudging, and then how to add your details on top, and then also how to protect your painting once it's finished. And then once you've gone through this really concise tutorial, you'll be able to go and tackle beginners' pastel pencil classes really easily. So let's get straight in. Your materials. When you go and look online, there are so many different pastel pencil brands to choose from. So I'm going to give you one brand that I would recommend you start with. I'm not sponsored by any of these materials. The easiest way to start with pastel pencils is with a Faber Castell Pitt pastel pencil. I'd start with a Faber Castell pencil because they are neither too hard or too soft. So if you're looking to draw fur and to draw hair, these are ideal. I'll show you in a moment how we're going to create an underpainting with them, which is the first stage of your painting, and then how you can use the same brand of pencil to put your details on top as well, so you don't need to buy extra materials. They have a good range of colours and tones, which is especially useful if you're looking to do pet portraits or wildlife art with them, or again natural hair for portraits of people. And they aren't too expensive. Caran D'Ache, for example, a really beautiful high standard pencil, got one here. These are extremely expensive to buy, so if you're just starting out, that's quite a big investment to make. They're also arguably for beginners not as easy to get going with. I've got another brand here which is Creatacolor. Creatacolor you're unlikely to come across, but if you follow my tutorials, I use about 3 Creatacolor pencils quite often because they have a few colours that are extremely useful to use. So link down below, there is a free guide to pastel pencils where I list all of the numbers, all labelled by a number on the end. 140, for example, is this blue. So you can download that for free and you can see my recommended list. Another brand you might have come across is Stabilo Carbothello. These are a lovely pastel pencil. If you've got a set of Stabilos that you haven't opened yet and you're thinking, oh, I've got to go and buy the Faber Castell, get cracking with your Stabilos. For a beginner, these are a really good pencil to be using. They are a bit softer than the Faber Castell, and I do tend to find that the Faber Castell have a bit of a better range of colours and tones for wildlife art. Now, one that you are likely to have seen in the shops is a Derwent pastel pencil. I wouldn't recommend buying a Derwent pastel pencil. For what they are, I think they're fairly expensive and they're extremely soft. They're in fact very, very chalky. I don't think they have the greatest amount of pigment when you're using them, and I find them very difficult to use for adding that final level of detail. So if you're wanting to draw the fur and the hair, these are not the best pencils to start learning with, in my opinion. You can buy Faber Castell in a set. You can buy them in tins of, I think, up to 60, and you can also buy them individually. So again, in that free guide below, I go through the most useful colours to buy if you don't want to invest in a whole tin, but you're looking to do wildlife or pet portraits, or even portraits of people. They would be a really good collection of pencils to get going with. It's much cheaper than investing in an entire set if you're not at that stage yet. And then one other thing that you can buy to do with your pencil specifically is a pencil extender. You can see this is a Derwent one, it doesn't really matter. And you can see how small the pencil is inside there. So it's a really simple little contraption. It just screws tighter and looser so that you can pop your pencil in, tighten it up, and then you're not wasting any pastel, which obviously saves you quite a lot of money. So they're the pencils. I would then also recommend getting a putty rubber. Again, I use a Faber Castell putty rubber. It's just the brand that I've always used for the putty rubbers, and I'm really happy with it. So don't fix what's not broken. These are not expensive at all. There are just a couple of pounds from most art shops. You need to warm them up in your hands a little bit, and then once you've warmed it up a bit, it will respond really, really well. So that's your pencils, that's the rubber. Paper. I would say for pastel pencils, even more than buying the correct brand of pastel pencil, your paper is far more important to invest in. So I use Clairefontaine pastel mat board, which is this, and you can see it's quite rigid. And then I also use the Clairefontaine pastel mat paper, which is kind of like a thin card, to be honest. It's not like your standard 80 GSM copy paper. It is thicker than that. This is quite expensive, so you might be put off and tempted to try the other brands or other pastel papers. I would highly recommend though that you stick with the Clairefontaine. If you look at other artists online and on YouTube, most of them are using the Clairefontaine pastel mat. So basically what this is, if you imagine almost like the pile of a carpet, this has little velvet fingers, and what we do, we layer the pastel on and it fills up the tooth of the card, the gaps, if you like, between these soft velvet fingers on this card. And as we layer it up, the pastel gets trapped in between, and this means that we don't need to use a fixative, which is a spray. You might have come across fixatives online, lots of questions about whether to use them or not. Generally speaking, it's just a personal preference whether you decide to use a fixative, but if you try spraying fixative on Clairefontaine pastel mat, I have found it to actually leave stain marks. I would really recommend not using a fixative. This board is designed so that you can use pastel pencils on them and you don't need to spray it afterwards. Another advantage to not using a fixative with pastel pencils is that fixatives lay a very light layer over the top of your work. Whites go a little bit grey and your colours go a little bit dull. And then, as I said, with this paper, it actually leaves little marks on it as well. So just don't use a fixative. If you're using Clairefontaine pastel mat paper or board, you don't need to use it. You can see here there are different colours. So this is the sand. If you're going to invest in just one colour to start off with, I'd say either choose the sand or the light blue, which is almost like a grey. They are really, really good all-round colours to be getting on with. So that is the Clairefontaine sand, that is the Clairefontaine light blue. This is the Clairefontaine grey, just so that you can see it for reference. This is the Clairefontaine brown, that's a piece of paper. And this is the dark blue, again, little pieces of paper. I use lots of different colours, but the sand and the light blue are perfect to get going with. Lastly, you're going to need some crystal paper. It can also be called glassine paper. I used to buy the Clairefontaine crystal paper, but now, to be honest, I just get a cheaper brand, and I find that they work absolutely fine, and they are a lot cheaper. So I'll show you how to use this later, but what it does is it stops your work from smudging. So this is incredibly important stuff, and certainly something that you shouldn't skimp on. You definitely need the crystal paper. Okay, so let's see how to actually use your pastel pencils. So you're going to want to sharpen your pencils up. You need a sharp Stanley blade for this, obviously pastel pencil and some sanding paper. I'm just using some P180 sanding paper here. Taking the pencil in one hand, I'm actually right-handed and I'm holding the pencil in my left. Take my blade, I put my thumb against obviously the flat side of the blade, and this is kind of almost like a pairing motion. So I'm pushing with this thumb, I'm pushing the blade through the wood and sort of contracting my hand so that the pencil moves closer to my thumb and therefore the blade is pushed through the wood. What you want to think about doing is pushing the blade along the length of the pencil instead of digging it in. And you can see I start fairly far back, and then what I tend to do is just go around the edge and whittle it down a little bit. And this really helps when you're doing your underpainting, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, to be able to get your pencil flat to the table. So I do take off quite a bit of wood. I really like to expose the pastel. It definitely helps when it comes to drawing your details. And then hold the pencil quite low to the table and just start to sand it in a circular motion. Once you've finished sanding it, just make sure to wipe it off on some kitchen towel. If you don't wipe it off, when you put your pencil onto paper, there's going to be a little plume of pastel dust and it's going to get stuck in the pastel mat. As another little tip, when you're finished with your pencils, you don't need anything fancy to keep them in. I tend to reuse old Jiffy bags and just pop them in there, and it keeps them really safe. You don't want to drop a pastel pencil because they do break very easily. So if you're wondering firstly what the difference is between a pastel pencil and a soft pastel, then you can see it quite clearly here. The soft pastels are like a chalk. The pastel pencil is the same material, but they tend to put a higher amount of binder in there, so more glue effectively, so that they are a little bit denser and a little bit stronger, and you can use them as a small piece of pastel without it breaking, whereas this is much more crumbly. It works really well for an underpainting if you've got a large surface to cover all at once. So I'm going to show you how to blend pastel together. There are a few ways to do this. So if I start with my pencil on the side, you can see I'm holding it fairly low to the table, and I'm moving it in kind of an oval shape, and I'm just encouraging the pastel to go into the paper here. I put a fairly thick layer down, so there's actually a little bit of dust on the paper. And then I can take my other pencil and in the same way, but not pressing quite so hard this time, head over the top. There's actually quite a lot of pastel dust now. Okay, so let's start using the pastel pencils now. One of the first things you're going to want to be able to do is to blend your pencils together. So I'm going to show you two ways that you might want to do this. Firstly, let's say we're doing an underpainting, and that would be your first layer in the painting. I hold my pencil towards the end so that it can be nice and flat to the table. I'm then going to gently start moving it backwards and forwards. I'm almost making an oval shape here. The reason I make an oval shape is so that I don't end up with those hard lines where I change direction with my pencil. So move backwards and forwards, mixing it in. So let's say for this underpainting, I don't want it blue. For some reason I want to put this yellow on top. I'm going to hold my pencil in the same way towards the end. And you can see why sharpening the pencils in a way I do allows me to get this really long, flat piece of pastel out and some really smooth shading. So pick up the blue again and back over the top. You see it's really smoothly blending those two colours together. So we've got a sort of slushy green colour there. And there's quite a bit of pastel dust. I'm not actually pressing very hard with my pencil now. I'm using them as though they were a blending stub. I'm not really pressing in, I'm just mixing around. So you could go backwards and forwards like this as often as you want until you've got the effect that you're looking to achieve. But using the pencil on the side in this way is going to give you a really flat, smooth finish so that we don't end up with lots of shading lines. Okay, so you might have wanted to create a new tone or a new colour for an underpainting, but what happens when you want to blend one area into another? So if I start over here, I've got an area of blue. Again, I'm using it on the side, and I'm moving it in those sort of long oval shapes so that I don't get lots of hard edges. A hard edge is always more difficult to blend out. So as I'm heading into the area that I'm going to colour yellow, I'm getting lighter with my pencil. Again, I'm getting rid of hard edges so that it's going to be easier to blend from one colour into another. Then I'm going to take my golden yellow, start to lay some colour down, and then as I head to the blue, I'm getting lighter with the pencil. But by using it on the side in this way, it allows you to blend your two colours together in a really lovely, even fashion. So I pick up the blue, start from the area of blue and then very lightly drag it over the top of the yellow. Again, not a lot of pressure through the pencil anymore. Pastel is so nice and soft, these two colours are just going to blend together, almost hovering the pencil over the page. A little bit of the yellow again. This yellow is, it's got a stronger tint than the blue, so I'm going to need to use a little bit more blue to get the blend even. Okay, so we've got a really nice even blend there from a yellow into a totally different colour, the blue. Now you might want to know about smudging pastel with a finger. You can, but it doesn't go very far. This is because of the structure of the paper. I'm using the Clairefontaine pastel mat, and remember that has like a kind of velvet tooth to the paper. We're filling that up, and so when I'm trying to pull the pastel across, it's just getting caught in the paper, which is exactly what it's designed to do. This is why it's so good to draw on when you're trying to do those hyper-realistic wildlife or pet portraits or human portraits. It really grabs hold of your material so that you don't need to use a fixative afterwards. So if you're looking for a medium that you can really pull and push around, you really probably are thinking about taking some soft pastel chalks instead. So let's have a look at how we can use pastel pencils to draw fur and hair. Firstly, you're going to need your pencil to be needle sharp for this, so you really better practice the how to sharpen a pastel pencil first, and I have a longer tutorial on that if you prefer to watch a longer version. So I'm at quite a low angle to the table. If we go like a sort of pencil, you won't even be able to see this from the camera, but a kind of pencil stabbing motion, we're going to blunt the tip of the pencil very, very quickly. So using it at a lower angle to the table, I'm going to start to stroke the pastel over the top. So if I show you over here, and it will show up really nicely. These are quick motions. I'm actually twisting my pencil ever so slightly between each stroke. And what that's allowing me to do is keep the tip of the pencil a little bit stronger. Now you don't need to press overly hard for these markings to show up. If you press too hard, I'll show you with another colour, this is going to happen. So firstly, the tip is going to snap off, and then as I press harder and harder, you see how thick they are. So it's the same motion, I'm going really quick, I'm twisting my pencil, but they're looking really, really thick in comparison to these nice fine hairs over here. So almost stroking the pencil on and off the page really, really lightly. So one of the most important things when you're drawing hair, when you're drawing fur, is to make sure that your pencil remains super sharp. You also want to keep the markings going roughly in the same direction, obviously depending on the subject. And you want to try and avoid as much as possible hitting the paper really hard with your pencil as to start the stroke, because again, if you do that, you end up with these sort of splodgy marks. You often get almost like a dot at the top of the mark as well. So if you've got two different colours, obviously this is the most bizarre looking creature you've ever seen if it's got yellow and black fur, but you would just blend them into each other by making sure that your pencil markings are going in the same direction, and they would start to blend together. So twist your pencil if you can, try for quick movements, and keep your grip light on the pencil so that you're not pressing into that page, because they won't look like fur markings. They're going to be too thick and too heavy. So while you're drawing this, you're going to be really concerned about smudging your work. I know I've just said that you can't blend it with your finger that easily, but trust me, if you've laid down loads of fine details on the top and then you go with your hand over the top, that's going to happen. It's not a lovely, beautiful blend, but it has completely smudged all of your hard work. So that is where the crystal paper comes in. So with your crystal paper over the top, you put that there, and I can go backwards and forwards, and it's absolutely fine underneath. So it's worth its weight in gold. As you're working, make sure to rest your working hand on some crystal paper and protect both your underpainting and the details that you might have already laid down underneath it. Once you've finished your painting, what you're going to want to do is go back in with your darkest darks. So here we have the black in the eye. I would go back in with the black again and re-establish it. You'll be amazed how the blacks can turn a little bit grey as you're working, and the pastel dust around that area just kind of settles into the work. And likewise, if you had whites on your painting, you're going to want to go back through and pick the whites back out with a really sharp white. Then you're going to sign your painting. So again, make sure that your pencil is lovely and sharp when you come to sign. If you make a mistake as you're doing your signature, don't panic. Take your putty rubber and flatten it out. Make sure that it's clean on both sides first. When you're happy that it's clean, you're going to just press it evenly into your page and lift it up. If you go and start rubbing over your signature, it's going to actually smudge it a little bit and make it very, very difficult to clean it up and do it again. So I would just press, lift, remold your putty rubber so it's clean again, press and lift, and keep going, and it will get lighter and lighter. Once it's as light as it's going to get by doing the press and the lift, then you can gently rub it out with putty rubber. So now I know how to use your pastel pencils. I've got some free tutorials on YouTube, and these are great just to get you going. You'll be amazed how quickly you can make some photorealistic results with pastel pencils, even if you're a complete beginner, so they're worth having a look at. Don't forget about the free guides, they're linked below. And if you did enjoy this video and found it useful, please leave me a comment, let me know what you'd like to learn next, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks very much, and I'll see you again next time.